If you all remember, we discussed the MVC pipeline last year, and well, we talked about it. Sasha showed us a proof of concept. We found sponsors, obviously, who helped us spend time on actually building the thing. That started in September. Work has progressed until December. There is a pull request now, so that's a branch. It's a pull request to a branch, right? Yes, to a separate branch. There's a lot to review, so it's taking quite a bit of time for it to get reviewed, but essentially we are like ready for it to be integrated into that branch and then later on into DNN itself. And Sasha will show you more about the details. So.
Yes, so the idea of this session is to give you a big overview of the pipeline, MVC pipeline, how it's work. So for beginning, shout out to the sponsors, make it possible. And so that's the new interface to activate the MVC pipeline in DNN is you get one new settings in the site settings, and under you have on that setting 3 possibilities. The default one is web forms. Then your website your DNN installation is just working like before in web forms, nothing changed. The second option is to choose MVC. In that case, your whole portal is running in the MVC pipeline. In that case, if some modules on the pages are not supporting the MVC pipeline, you get a red message on your page for that module if you are logged in as administrator. If you are not logged in, you just not see the module on the page. And the third option is auto. This auto option make it so that he will first check on the page that will render it. If all modules on the page support MVC, then he will render in MVC. Otherwise, he fall back to web forms. And those are the 3 options on the site setting. And you can override this setting on each page. By default, is inherited, so he use the site settings to know if he need to run in MVC or web forms pipeline, and you can override and force a page to web forms or force a page to MVC. For typically, if most of your modules are MVC, you can set site settings MVC, and maybe some pages stay with web forms only modules, so you can switch them to web forms, for example.
Sasha, on the previous page, you have this remark at the bottom. All modules need to support web forms.
Yes,
you cannot have an MVC only?
No, the idea actually is that we need that all our modules need to support web forms. Because the idea is always that if MVC is not active, we fall back to web forms. That's a decision we make actually. Maybe it can be changed in the future to have.
For the first version, that's going to be the thing. If everybody starts using the MVC pipeline, then we might change that.
I understand that, but forcing everybody to support web forms seems like counterproductive in the sense that we will never abandon web forms.
Later on you will see that Sasha came up with another kind of module pattern which would be supported on both.
Okay. So if we little bit go more in details to know how it works, if we have a URL there for a specific page on the portal, the request come in, and the first step is that we will go to the URL rewriter of DNN, The URL rewrite is adapted for the pipeline. So in the MVC pipeline, the URL rewriter look at the site setting and the page settings that I showed just before to see if we will run the page in web forms or MVC. And it's the URL rewriter that rewrites the page for web forms. Like before, he rewrites the page name in a query string. For MVC, it rewrites it to an MVC route. After that, in the MVC pipeline, in place of using an RCSX skin, it will use a razor skin. And then, for the modules, he will use a new settings in the module manifest. In the .dnn file of your module, there is a new entry that with the name MVC control class that need to be set to make your module compatible with MVC pipeline. In the web forms, it was control source, and now there is a second one for the MVC pipeline. This is what I talk about. For web forms, we have already control SRC, and now we have also MVC control class. So if the module runs in web forms, you use control SRC. If the module runs in MVC, it will use the MVC control class. It's a plain C# class that will need to implement some interface that we will see after. In a module, you can have many module controls. Each control have his source code. The first one is the view control. That's the default control of your module. And this control, it runs on a normal way on a page and can be like you know, on the page where there are many modules. But in counterpart, the edit control runs always on a page where there is only one module control, only one module. This is an example of an edit control page. An edit control page I have also always a CTL query string. This is managed automatically by DNN when you use the edit URL of a module, it generates that URL. And here, in that case, the URL rewriter works a little bit different because he looks at the site setting and the page settings to know if he need to run in MVC or web forms, but he checks also the MVC control class to see if the control implement the MVC control. If not, even if the site setting is set to MVC, he falls back to web forms. The idea is that in that way you can migrate your module control by control to MVC. So if your module just implement the view control in MVC, the public page will run in MVC, but your edit control still run in web forms. Mm-hmm. Yes. Now we go a step further. In MVC, the module use a razor file to render the control, and we need some additional stuff to manage the interaction on your module. With interaction, I mean buttons, forms, all kinds of interactions. In web forms, for that we have an event-driven system that is based on postbacks and view state, and everything is encapsulated in a big form. In the MVC pipeline, we have no big form, and we have to manage the interactions more by ourselves. The benefit is that you have really more control about the output of the HTML, but you have to do a little bit more by yourself. Here you have two options, but I will say that for DNN, the recommended approach is more the first one. It's more like a SPA approach. It's, I think, the approach that most of people already know in DNN. It's the approach that you use JavaScript to manage the interactions and maybe the whole user interface, maybe with jQuery, but maybe also with React or Angular or another framework. And you rely on web APIs to make the interaction with your backend. And the web API work with the input and output in a JSON format. In that case, you not really need to use form tags in your module because you manage everything by yourself by JavaScript. And the alternative way to do, it's more the pure MVC way. Maybe we already do pure MVC programming here outside of DNN. Not so lot. The pure MVC approach is that you don't use web API controllers, but you use MVC controllers that have as input form data. It's data that is get directly from a form by HTML, and it returns HTML. It don't return JSON. That's the way a normal standard MVC work in .NET framework. The only restriction here in the MVC pipeline that is that we work with only one real MVC controller for the page. Like in web forms, we have a unique page, ISPX page. Here we have a unique MVC controllers. So if you want to use an MVC controller for each module to manage the interactions, you have to create an MVC controller that only return the HTML of your module. So just a part of your page, and not the whole page as usually done in MVC. So to manage that, you have to control the call to your MVC controller by JavaScript, by Ajax. It's something that it's officially supported by Microsoft. You find some also HTML helpers to do that. So it's possible to do that. If you look in the source code of the MVC pipeline, the HTML module is implemented that way. And there are other samples that implemented the first way. But I think for DNN people, it's more natural. The benefit of this approach with MVC is that you in reality use more C# code. Because all the logic of the interactions are made in the MVC controller, and so pure MVC in the first approach you use a little bit more JavaScript, maybe 50% C# for your web APIs and 50% JavaScript to handle really the interactions. And I just mentioned, but I come to later, that is the first approach can also be used in web forms. So we have the possibility with this approach to create a Razor MVC control that's also run in the web forms. So we have the same source code in the two pipelines if you don't use form tags. But I come back to that later. So what we need to implement really to make it work. The first thing is your skins. your skins need to be adapted. Typically, you can see the file structure of a web form skin on the top. The entry point is the default AC6, and here in this example with some includes. And to make this skin work in the MVC pipeline, like you see on the bottom, you have to create a views folder. In that views folder, you have to create a web.config file that is a standard web.config for the MVC pipeline. And then recreate every ACI6 file in Razor. So you end up with a skin that runs on both pipelines, in web forms and MVC. We have, after this, a session that go more in details about that. But here, a large overview of who you have to make your skins. In reality, you have to translate every skin object of web forms to a skin object in Razor. And in Razor, each skin object is a HTML helper with exactly the same parameters. So now for the modules, yes. Yes.
Okay, two things. First of all, you also said there's a web config necessary in each folder. I'm asking because I had something like that in 2Sexy for a while, but that caused trouble long term. What's in the web config?
The problem was in reality in DNN standard. There is some base Razor page configured in the root web.config. And this is not compatible with MVC6. And not with pure MVC, because they include some web form stuff in it.
Okay, but that would mean if we would change the initial one, this would not be necessary?
Yes.
Okay. Because again, I had a very similar problem with Sexy. I added my own base class. But as my system improved, I suddenly had settings all over everywhere, which were not optimal anymore, and I could not really change it. Basically, what I also just did is now I basically just say you always have to declare what type of Razor you're using.
Web page. What kind of web page?
What you're inheriting from.
Yes. But I try not to use inherit, because when you use inherit, you cannot use anymore Aruba's model. At model, you know, in your Razor.
Okay. We'll look at it.
You know.
I think it's important also to realize also regarding your question is that we are trying to create like an in-between version to make sure that it gets into DNN. So there are compromises everywhere because it's that's the only way, and it's the first version. So as we said, if everybody's going to use this, then we might probably be able to change it in the root web.config. But for now, yeah,
but sure, it's not optimal. I think it was not very optimal to put the base class in the root.web.config, but surely it was also historical, because in MVC3 it was different. You don't have a model attribute in your Razor files. Or maybe at this point, some other people have already questions about. So I go further, more in detail about how to implement a module control. So we in reality support the three module patterns of DNN. So the MVC model pattern, not the web forms model pattern. This is replaced with a new pattern we for the moment called Razor Plus. And we support also SPA module pattern. But in reality, this is the recommended way to make module controls in the MVC pipeline, and we call it Razor Plus. What do you do to implement that kind of module control? You have to just inherit from a base class, Razor module control base. Then you can create a constructor, and this constructor can use dependency injection. So you can inject your services for data access or everything you need. And then you have to implement the invoke method. It's typically something very similar like a controller action. It's a method that returns a view, the view which is in reality your Razor file. If we go a little bit more in detail in the invoke method, and that is a typically implementation of it, you start with getting your data, then you create a model, and you give that model to the view. I think most of the people can recognize that kind of pattern. For the view that is used, by default, if you not specify the Razor file that is used by your control, there is a naming convention that will use this kind of Razor file, desktop modules, your module name, views folder, and then the name of your control. But you can also customize the name of your Razor file that you will use, and you can, for example, use also more than one Razor file for a control. In addition to return a view, module control can return the other things. The first one is the content, is just raw HTML. So in that case, you don't need to have a Razor file. You can just return HTML. That will be the content of your module. And the second additional thing is for error handling. You can also return error with a title and a message. In that case, the module renders just a red box with a title and a message. That is a short example of a view. So it's used, like I told just before, the model expression, or the model at model to define the model class. And once you do that, you can use all the properties of your model in your Razor file. In your Razor file, you can have access to some general information of DNN. You can have access to the model context, module ID, and the local resource file by using view data. Or you can add it by yourself to your model. So, and once you create your class, you have to define your class in the module manifest. I showed it already before. Is that clear?
It's really a lot like the old MVC module as well.
One thing we included also in the MVC pipeline is a wrapper module that can wrap this Razor Plus module in a web form control. that give you the possibility to create a Razor Plus module by using the MVC pattern, and that will run natively in MVC. But you can use it. You can wrap this Razor Plus control in a web form control, so that you can have a unique source code for the two pipelines. So here you see, you can define here a generic class that rely on what you define here to render the control in the web forms pipeline. So it will work a little bit like the actual host Razor module. It just render the control in web forms, and that's what about you speak in the beginning. So you can have in reality a module that run in the two pipelines, because the only restriction, if you want to use that, is that you cannot use form tags in your Razor file. Because if you use form tags in your Razor file, they will be rendered in the web forms, and form tags cannot be nested. Otherwise, if you don't use this, you can just use more than one form tags in your MVC pipeline. Each module can have their own form tags. For module actions, it's just like before. You have just to implement eActionable on your module control and define the action just like before. But we introduced also a new interface that a module can implement. It's called ePage Contributor. If you implement this interface, you have to implement the method you see there on the screen. And the idea behind this is that this method will do all the stuff that generate HTML or response headers that are not part of the module HTML. Actually, typically, when we have to register CSS or JavaScript, we do that in the same place where that we generate the HTML of your module. And the consequence of that is that if you use module caching, this code is not executed, actually in web forms also. For the CSS and the JavaScript before, in the old CDF, it works a little bit because there are some comments that are injected in the HTML of the cache and then recreate, but it works not very good. But with this solution, you really separate what is part of the HTML of your module part of the page from what is injected in the page headers, response headers, maybe, or other stuff. And when you use module caching, everything works well. You can see examples are activating a service framework or including CSS, JavaScript files. And we also introduce a new page service that is already present in the actual DNN-10 version. We made a separate pull request for that, and it's already present. And in this page service, you get some methods to modify dynamically the page title, the page descriptions, the page keywords, to inject meta tags of your page dynamically in a way that is compatible with web forms and MVC pipeline. And typically, what you can do there also is use the new content security policy stuff. Because content security policy injects headers in your response, which need to be done also if you cache. But this interface at the moment works only in the pipeline, in the MVC pipeline, but it can maybe an idea to support that also in web forms, but actually not. And just to end, I will just mention that I create a kind of small library that you can use already in the actual DNN. If you want already to use the Razor Plus module pattern in your existing DNN, even in DNN-9 or DNN-10, you can there use a library or just copy the source code from there and use the Razor Plus pattern in your module to be ready for the future. So that's what I have. So maybe if there are some more questions. How long? What's the time? You know? Huh?
Do you have sample modules that
Yes.
use as guidance for this?
We.
Recent versions of DNN include now in the source code there are actually sample modules in the central repo, and these are the contact list sample modules that were a separate project before. If you go to the MVC Pipeline branch, you see those same sample modules, all of them adjusted to the MVC Pipeline, plus the new Razor Plus proposition that he's got there. Also, we first will have a presentation about skinning, and then we have a presentation about exactly that coming up as well.
And the HTML module is also converted to MVC. It's also an sample.
I'm asking so it gets recorded.
Yeah. Yeah.
And would you consider that this is the way you've done, for example, the HTML module? It's the best practice on how to be going forward? Or is it just an example?
The HTML module is done with MVC way of doing. You know, yeah, it's done this way. The second, I don't think this is the recommended way. The recommended way is more using Web API and not MVC.
Yeah. Next question comes, why don't we support that out of the way so that people can...
But we support the two.
No. So that if you provide some samples, why don't we provide the samples
Yeah,
the appropriate way?
The sample models that he speak about are made the first way, and HTML the second way. So we have a sample for the two. I think that this can be appropriate for some scenarios, but I think for the DNN community, it will be easier to work like this. And the benefit of this is also that you can use the same source code in web forms and in MVC pipeline, and that not. It was also I choose for that for the HTML module because this have less impact for the existing users of DNN, because when the MVC pipeline come out, all the websites still running on the same code for the HTML module, on the web forms code. It's only people that switch to MVC that will run the HTML module in MVC. I not yet ported to this actually, but the idea is to do it the first way, the SPA way, and to have the same source code for the two. The challenge, I think, for module, surely for module vendors, is to have a version that is compatible with different versions of DNN. Because you can not distribute your source code that implement an interface from DNN 11 and use it in DNN 9. That's for me the biggest challenge, but
Well, we had those challenges in the past as well.
Yeah.
no, actually, open content is still compatible for sure with DNN 8.
Two questions. One would be if the interfaces would be in an own NuGet package, then it would probably be possible to already support them in DNN9 without running it.
Yeah.
So that's just an idea. I heard that the pull request is huge, which makes it daunting for the core team to even have a feeling if they can accept it or not. Is there anything, is it really just that we have to wait now, or is there anything we could guess? Peter?
Right, maybe I should answer that one. Tomorrow we're going to discuss, we have a similar whole afternoon to discuss the future, like how we tackle specifically that issue is central tomorrow. But not to already cut the grass for tomorrow. I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's focus first on today what has been built, how it works, and the most important takeaway for this afternoon will be for you to understand what is currently being proposed and and to try to think, well, what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my skins? What does it mean for my modules? What does it mean for the sites that I've built? And tomorrow I hope to get your feedback. So tonight you will have a good glass of beer, you will have a great sleep, and you will think about this in your sleep. And then tomorrow you'll be like, okay, now if I could add one thing, or if I could remove one thing, etc. And that is something I would like to hear about you about tomorrow as well. Yeah.
But Peter, maybe you can explain a little bit more in detail the challenge so that they can.
Yeah. No, I don't mind explaining the challenge exactly. So the challenge is, what we are faced with is this code works, right? I will demo in a little bit how this is all working for at least on the module side as well. But all of that code needs to be verified. And per policy, 2 different verifiers need to go through it. And there are very good reasons for this that I can delve into as well. But 2 people need to verify it. Now, what we see is that for most PRs that come in are relatively small and target one thing that it wants to change in the platform or add. That's fairly easy to check because you know what you're looking for. You're looking at this PR for doing that specific thing and it doesn't touch anything else in the framework. When you get to larger PRs, there are PRs, for instance, that touch hundreds of files that were also fairly easy to check in because they did the same thing in every file, right? So Brian Jukes has been improving the code quality of DNN, and he would make a tweak and he would say, well, now we have to do it in this way in the code, and he would repair everything throughout the DNN platform that had the wrong pattern to build it up to the right pattern. It makes the code easier to maintain downstream, and it's very valuable work, but it would change a ton of files. Now, those are still also relatively easy to check because you check the first 10, 20, and you're like, oh yeah, that's the pattern, and yeah. It just goes in. But this is a very different beast. This is a lot of file changes, and some of them touch what we call the critical path, which is every time a DNN page is asked, it runs through that code. And that means if you make, well, first of all, if there's a bug on that critical path, or two, if there is a performance penalty on the critical path, all of a sudden, all around the world, all DNN sites will be running slower or will be having a bug. So to check that code, we have to carefully look at the critical path and check that code really, really carefully. Now this is very, it's creating some stress, let's say, within the Git approvers group, the people who check that code, people like myself. Because with this one, we can't screw up. We have to check that code on that critical path, but it's a lot. And so if you go through the interface of GitHub, where you see, the first page is just a discussion, and then the last tab is all the file changes. You go to the file changes, and where did that happen? Oh, that happened in the other class. So you go up and down, etc. That it's difficult to work with that tool, and we're, I'm launching a debate internally. Is that actually the best tool to check these kinds of PRs? Should we use something else in terms of tooling to check these PRs? So the UI of GitHub is is also hindering us here. It's compounding the problems that we have. So that's currently where it's at. I was hoping that by the time this conference came around, and I was putting some pressure internally to get this done, but that we would have the code checked by then. Meaning it doesn't immediately go into DNN, but it at least has been checked, and now then it's in waiting for the version that we decided goes into.